want to come up here? They're not quite as comfortable as some of these, but there's plenty of chairs. So I would like to go ahead and get started. What I'd like for you guys to do, I want y'all to meet someone you don't know, but that's kind of in your similar discipline, because we're going to do some active learning techniques in a little bit. So I've got biomedical engineering, mechanical engineering, psychology, computer science. What are you? Biomedical sciences. Biomedical sciences. Retailing, marketing, awesome. Civil and environmental engineering, awesome. English, computer science. Management science. Oh, I knew that. Physics, awesome. Biomedical science is another biomedical. Arts, biomed, English, and education. So find someone similar discipline that you don't know, meet them, and just kind of network. Oh. Okay, if you could wrap up your discussions, please.
It's just going to come out. We have one more left.
All right, if y'all could wrap up your discussions. I hate breaking this up, but we got to move on. So I'm happy y'all are networking. So you'll get to talk with these people later on in the session. I wanted y'all to meet someone you've never met before. So hopefully y'all are all here, aside from the fact that you kind of have to be here for at least one of them. You chose this one because it was kind of interesting. And I hope that from this session you guys get some new tips and tricks and techniques to apply in your own classes that you're actually teaching. So what we're going to be doing today basically is kind of going over the main principles of what active learning is. There's these three, what I think are really key principles that you should keep in mind when you're doing active learning techniques, or at least wanting to incorporate them into your class. I am going to give you examples of how you apply these in your classes, whatever the class might be, and that's where we're going to kind of brainstorm how you can use them in your own particular course. And I'll be giving you a lot of different types of techniques as we go, okay? So one of my favorite, and I'm sure y'all have heard this, one of my favorite phrases is this Native American proverb that says, tell me and I'll forget. Show me and I may not remember, but involve me and I'll understand. And that is active learning to the core. Getting people involved in doing their own learning is how you get them to remember the information. The second quote is a little bit longer, but it's from these two people that really kind of developed what we understand as good teaching practices. It's called the 7 Principles for Good Practice. And this was developed in the 80s, but it's still very much in use today. And basically they're saying that learning is not a spectator sport. Students don't learn by just sitting there. They actually learn by getting up, talking about what they're doing, writing about it, relating it to past experiences, relating it to their lives. And that's really key when we talk about active learning. Okay, so you have to incorporate it and put it into part of yourself to actually learn it, truly understand it. And this was from tons of research. It was a meta-analysis of research on undergraduate education. So for active learning, the question is the most effective, and you guys can tell me, is the most effective way to learn or of teaching is just direct delivery of me brain dumping on you guys. Is that the best way to learn knowledge? You all should say no. Okay? Because why is that? Why is that not the best way to do knowledge, especially in this day and age? Y'all tell me. Oh, need to be what?
Able to relate to it?
Yes, you need to be able to relate to it. Where can they get knowledge now? That's right, on your little cell phone that you guys text on, and they text on all the time. Books already do it. The internet is out there 24/7, always available. So what we as instructors need to be able to do is to give them the tools for learning how to incorporate that into their own knowledge and into their own experiences. Okay? The way to deliver knowledge also depends on what your goal is in your class, whether you're a discussion leader or you're a recitation session leader or you're an actual lab instructor. It depends on what the content is, and it depends on you guys. You all have different techniques and styles, and that's something you should incorporate into how you actually lead your courses, okay? So, basically active learning is this active, interactive search for meaning, okay? Search for meaning and understanding. And it's a way that what students do is they actually construct the knowledge that they're given. They want to construct it, and instead of just receiving it, they need to construct it and allow it to shape their experiences. So really key to active learning is that this construction of their knowledge that they keep with them is shaped by the activity, by their interactions with others around them. And that is how, if you guys can think about, so why don't you go ahead and think about, just right now, what would be in one of your favorite courses, what was a topic that you remember best? And was it associated with an active learning technique? So just kind of think on that for about a minute. If you can remember what one of your most favorite topics was in one of your classes as an undergraduate or even as a graduate, and how it was associated. And we'll think too. Does anybody have an example that they can give of one that they remember being associated? It may not even be in your discipline. It may be in a discipline completely different from what your actual major is. Let me go ahead and give you an example for myself. One of the courses that I remember best in college was not related to marine science, which is what my major was. It was anthropology. And we read a book on one of the cultures of Africa. And I just remember it so well because that professor went and spent several months in Africa with that culture and was able to describe really interactive examples of how that culture lived. And he was able to give us pictures and show us videos. So it was very, very much a way for me to incorporate his experiences into my own learning, which is, he was able to really bring it into a personal level. What about you guys? What was an example that you can remember of what y'all best remember from a course? Any examples? And feel free to share. Anyone? Yes?
I took a criminal justice course once by a professor who had been incarcerated for 5.5 years.
Wow.
So he gave a lot of personal experiences, and it was very interesting to see how the stories connected
Yeah.
with the truth of what the lecture was saying.
Wow. So yeah, personal experiences, very much so. Anything else? Any other ideas or examples from your own experiences?
I had something very similar. My favorite class was psychology of crime and aggression.
Oh, wow.
And my professor had actually gone and interviewed those psychopaths and sociopaths who were incarcerated and caught. So she had a lot of actual interviews that she was able to read and then tell us about like the interactions of the criminals.
Wow. Yeah. So again, yeah, bringing in personal experiences, really having some way to connect, not just the content, well, connect that content knowledge to actually incorporate into your own knowledge in your own brain. Any other ideas or classes that y'all have had such experiences? I'm just a little shy today. It's okay. I don't mind. The reason why I wanted you to start thinking about that is that, and it may be something you just really haven't thought of, that active learning is not obvious sometimes. Even stopping and having students discuss with each other an idea or a concept is active learning. It's a way of getting them to incorporate knowledge without you just delivering it straight to them, mouth to ears, okay? So active learning can be all sorts of different types. So the idea that active learning is a really good way to teach of using these techniques is based in real educational research. And this research shows that this peer learning and peer teaching, where students teach each other, really is very effective on a wide range of skill levels and content. So it can be any department in here can use active learning and do it well. And the students will get a lot out of it. Students do better. They have better exam scores, better test scores, better writing scores, better social skills are developed from active learning. And students discover that, and you guys have probably discovered this yourself, when you teach something, you learn it really well. I know that whenever I had to first teach physical oceanography to an introductory oceanography class, I finally learned it. I was so proud of myself. Physical oceanography. I've had it 2 courses graduate school and I didn't actually ever learn it until I taught it. So it makes you actively think about the material. When students are teaching each other in class or doing an active learning skill, they're actually thinking about the material in class itself. They're not putting it to the side and taking it home and then studying it the night before, and then it just goes right out the window again anyway, okay? And then they're processing those concepts that you're trying to get them to learn into their own thought processes and into their own verbiage that they use in their head. So what I want to do is go through these 3 primary principles of active learning. And one of them, well, many of them are based, they're not based on this, but there's a children's book called Fish is Fish. Has anybody ever heard of this book before, Fish is Fish? All right, I'm going to read it to you, okay? Another example of active learning. It's also a really cute book. So it's called Fish is Fish. It's by Leo Leone, and I'm going to show you the pictures as I go. So at the edge of the woods there was a pond, and there a minnow and a tadpole swam among the weeds. They were inseparable friends. One morning the tadpole discovered that during the night he had grown 2 little legs. "Look," he said triumphantly, "look, I am a frog." "Nonsense," said the minnow. "How could you be a frog if only last night you were a little fish just like me?" They argued and argued until finally the tadpole said, "Frogs are frogs and fish is fish, and that's that." In the weeks that followed, the tadpole grew tiny front legs and his tail got smaller and smaller. And then one fine day, a real frog now, he climbed out of the water and onto the grassy bank. The minnow too had grown and become a full-fledged fish. He often wondered where his 4-footed friend had gone, but days and weeks went by and the frog did not return. Then one day, with a happy splash that shook the weeds, the frog jumped into the pond. "Where have you been?" the fish asked excitedly. "I have been about the world, hopping here and there," said the frog, "and I have seen extraordinary things." "Like what?" asked the fish. "Birds," said the frog mysteriously, "birds." And he told the fish about the birds who had wings and 2 legs and many, many colors. As the frog talked, his friend saw the birds fly through his mind like large feathered fish. What else? Asked the fish impatiently. Cows, said the frog. Cows. They have 4 legs, horns, eat grass, and carry pink bags of milk. And people, said the frog, men, women, children. And he talked and talked until it was dark in the pond. But the picture in the fish's mind was full of lights and colors and marvelous things, and he couldn't sleep. Ah, if he could only jump about like his friend and see that wonderful world. And here's a picture of his cows and his birds and his people, of the fish. And so the days went by. The frog had gone and the fish just lay there dreaming about birds in flight, grazing cows and those strange animals all dressed up that his friend called people. One day he finally decided that come what may, he too must see them. And so with a mighty whack of the tail, he jumped clear out of the water onto the bank. He landed in the dry, warm grass, and there he lay gasping for air, unable to breathe or to move. Help, he groaned feebly. Luckily, the frog, who had been hunting butterflies nearby, saw him and with all his strength pushed him back into the pond. Still stunned, the fish floated about for an instant. Then he breathed deeply, letting the clean water flow across his gills. Now he felt weightless again, and with an ever so slight motion of the tail, he could move to and fro, up and down as before. He smiled at his friend the frog, who sat watching him from a lily leaf. You were right, he said. Fish is fish. Okay. So what was the main idea from that book with respect to incorporating knowledge? How did the fish incorporate the knowledge that the frog gave him about that outer world? What did he do? Do what? That's right. Interpreting the knowledge he was given based on his experiences that he had as a fish. And the key is that we do that too, all the time. That is a common problem that you have to factor in when you're giving knowledge to students. They will take that knowledge and incorporate into their understanding based on their prior experiences. Okay? So what you have to do as an instructor, no matter what your department is figure out what that prior knowledge is. So the new understanding that they developed is constructed on what they already know and how they already understand the world. Okay? So these preconceptions that are already there are sometimes really difficult to break. And sometimes you don't even know they're there until you start asking them exam questions and they start popping up out of really weird positions, really weird places. And it's difficult to change. Even when students memorize stuff and do well on exams, when you actually give them real world examples, they aren't able to really factor in that knowledge unless they've been activated to rethink that knowledge itself. So let me give you an example. This is a book. There's one, this is for sciences, there's also one for humanities as well about how students learn in the classroom. And so one example was the elementary students versus college students were given an example about momentum, mass versus velocity. And so what happened was this guy named Andrew DeSessa, he conducted a study in which he compared the performance of college physics students at a top technological university with elementary school children on the task involving momentum. He had them both play a computerized game so that it required them to direct an object to hit a target. So they're on a computer, they're required to direct this object to make it hit a target at the top of the screen, but do it so that the minimum speed is reached at impact. So they had to direct it so that the object would slow down and be at a minimum speed once it hit that object at the top. And so what DeSessa found was that both groups of students failed miserably at the task, both college and elementary. Despite the training, college physics majors, just like elementary school children, applied the force when the object was just below the target because the object was going back and forth, failing to take the momentum slowing down into account. And so it turned out that when they quizzed the students about it, the college students, it revealed that they knew the relevant physical properties and formulas and would have done well on a written exam, but actually in the context of the game or real life, were not able to apply it because they didn't have that experience of incorporating that knowledge into real world examples. So what that shows you is that you have to get students to think about their misconceptions that they may have existing in their mind from previous educators to get them to change those those misconceptions. So ways that you can do this in your class, different techniques you can do this in your class, is ask them about their misconceptions. Before you even start on a topic or a concept, get them to start thinking about what they already know about a topic. So, for example, what I do with marine science when I start talking about heat capacity of the ocean, I say, okay, you guys know you walk out onto a beach in the middle of summer, what happens when you walk out barefoot onto a beach? What do you guys know? What happens to your feet? It's hot, burns, blisters, awful. So where do you run? The water, okay? And the water is cold. So why is that? Why is the water cold in the middle of the summer, but the sand is hot? And so that gets them to start thinking about, well, it must have something to do with the water itself, some property of the water. So you get them to start thinking about their preconceptions of what they know of the properties of matter and how different matter states will absorb heat and transmit heat by getting them to think about their common everyday scenarios, okay? So what I want y'all to do is meet up with one of the people you talked about and think about an example of this, of how you can get students to explore their preconceptions of a question in your own discipline. So I want to give y'all a couple minutes to do that right now. So y'all can brainstorm together of a good question. I'm going to ask a couple of y'all to give some examples. So let's go ahead and do that right now, okay? Yeah, if y'all know people, go ahead. Absolutely. Oh. Absolutely. We have engineers up here. If you're all engineers, you can come up here. We have engineers back here. Retailing, marketing here. What department are you?
Computer science.
There's a who's computer science? Who's computer science? All right. What department you're in? I know I asked you this already. Management. So they're in retailing. I don't know if that would be a good group for you to be in or not. And marketing. Okay.
They're given what, like, for instance, they're given, like, what's inside, like, the system, like, you know, competence about flowing, and they're given all these things that measure certain things, so they should be able to figure out, like, how things would flow.
How do you like ask them?
There's physics and math over here. There's another physics person over here, by the way, that just came in. You're okay? Okay. Donna, secondary ed, math, physics. You're Bing Guo, right?
Yeah.
I know I recognize your face. I was like, I know him. I've seen him before. This is your second face-to-face, right? Weren't you at another one? I thought you were at another one.
have been there during class.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yep.
People think it's
But you have to learn how to incorporate it. So I
Yes, sir.
think that things like how this is so complicated when they get
Who? I know. I told them about it.
different equations. They're like, oh, well, that's what takes so long to do one calculus problem. They don't realize like it's only, yeah.
You guys are actually getting to the second principle of active learning, so that's good. That's awesome. All right, go ahead and wrap up what y'all are discussing, please. Yeah, right. Go on, yeah. Okay, can I have a volunteer for someone who thought up an example of addressing preconceived ideas in y'all's classes? Anyone? There were some good discussions going.
I guess for Eva and I in our senior design class, it's more of a general concept.
Okay.
But it's, they think that they're given a specific problem to solve and they'll have everything to be able to solve it, when in fact they have to incorporate what knowledge they have into figuring out the problem solution. It's not just a straightforward, here's the question, here's the answer.
Yeah. And what level course is that?
It's senior design, so like capstone projects
Oh.
where they incorporate everything.
Right. And I was listening in, they're getting into the idea that you actually need to also have them realize they have to incorporate prior knowledge. So that's a second step of active learning, and it's a very good thing to come to recognize. What are some other ideas you guys were discussing back there? What was y'all's?
So, I'm MCA for second marriage.
Okay.
A lot of students have preconceived about marriages.
Okay.
Like cohabitating before marriage and how that affects divorce rates and effective communication styles.
Awesome. So people come in with this idea that cohabiting is better than not cohabiting before marriage?
As far as I know, people think that cohabiting beforehand is negative.
Oh.
Because there's been some results, like in books that have been published, that cohabiting leads to a higher divorce rate, which isn't necessarily true, because it's okay from positive variables.
Got it. Yep. Interesting.
So it's interesting to see like 75% of marriages are preceded by cohabitation.
Huh. Very cool. All right, what else? There was another group that was over here that y'all had some good discussions going on. What was y'all's? I won't pick on y'all.
Okay, well, I teach a chemistry class for nursing majors, and like, I mean, some things they just don't understand, I guess, like, maybe it applies to like nursing, but then they still don't understand like just what the compound looks like.
Oh.
Maybe use like structural models. I don't, like, it's kind of hard, like, if they don't understand like the basic fundamentals of it.
Right.
But, I mean, they could maybe better understanding use like models or, you know, apply it to nursing.
Right.
In a particular case anyway.
Well, especially when the chemical structure actually affects its activity and that sort of thing. So that's good. Okay. Any other ideas that y'all came up? Yes.
So there is this course taught in business school about service operations,
Mm-hmm.
how little things are done by business to improve the customer satisfaction, etc., and their efficiency. So students can be asked, for example, most of them have gone to banks, they have stood in queues, so they can be asked questions like, what do you think about, give me examples where you have two queues, versus just one color, or do you just have one cube and many colors? So tell me which one did you find you ended up waiting longer or was more efficient as you wanted? And then you go into the maths of it, and then you see that was your experience same as what the mathematics would tell you.
Oh, how cool. What is it? So I can get in that line.
Well, it's the one cue with many colors comes out to be a bit more.
The faster one.
Lots of cues or one cue per color.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, except just don't ever follow me behind because I always pick the wrong line. So that's cool. I didn't know there was math to that. Very awesome. Great examples. When you do this, one of the things that you can do in your class and get them to think about their preconceived ideas is kind of, one way to do this type of activity is get them to think about what are their initial reactions or thoughts about this concept that you're about to address. Whether it's an activity that you're going to do in a lab or it's an actual lecture topic or a discussion that you're going to be doing. You can also do, one of your handouts today is probably the most comprehensive active learning list that I've ever found. And there are almost 200 different types of active learning techniques. And so number 16 or number 23 are two that you can use in this situation where you have, for number 16 it's called Make Them Guess, where you introduce a new subject by asking a question that few will know the answer to, but it gets them to start talking about it and start talking about their preconceptions. So these are good ways to address this first principle of active learning. So any questions about this first principle and what we've kind of gone over with our little activity? And that was an active learning technique that y'all just did, think, pair, share. And y'all, I'm sure, have done it before. I hope so. Any questions? Okay. All right, let's look at number 2. Some of y'all discovered this in your discussions, that for a student to do well in this particular area, to develop competence, students must, first of all, have some knowledge. And especially in your higher level courses that you might be teaching, students need that factual knowledge that they can then start piecing together to come to that next level of understanding. They have to understand how those facts fit into the conceptual framework of the course. What was it you guys were talking about with respect to the one that you gave me? Senior design, that's what it was.
They have to incorporate their knowledge from all the previous classes.
Yep. Yep. So it's not just piecing in A, B, C, D gives you solution E, but you have to bring in other courses, and this was the capstone course, right, in order to get that answer. And they need to be able to learn how to organize their knowledge, and what that means is don't have just a whole bunch of facts there, but recognize that all knowledge has a hierarchy, and they need to start putting it into hierarchies as they're learning it. And then that allows them to actually apply it to new experiences. So an example of this that I wanted to give you guys is that's called Darts and Water. And this was another test, an early study that compared the effects of learning a procedure versus actually learning with understanding. And there were 2 groups of children that practiced throwing darts at a target that itself, the target was underwater. And so one group explained what refraction of light was and how light refracted objects underwater and made it at a different position compared to what it actually was because of the bending of light. The other group did not get told that information. Both groups did equally well on the practice task, which involved shooting a dart at the target that was 12 inches underwater. But then when they moved the target so that it was only 4 inches underwater, the group that actually had been told the information obviously knew what happened, knew what to do to adjust throwing their darts. And then the group that did not get told that information could not actually hit the target because they didn't have that factual knowledge. Okay? So it helps to have the factual knowledge, and then what you do in the active learning is you get them to incorporate that knowledge into this new understanding of the concept. So you can only apply what you know if when you first learn it, you understand it, you put meaning with it, okay? So I think one of the big issues in learning theory is that it's not should we be teaching facts versus should we be teaching big ideas? It's how can we get students to incorporate the facts into the big ideas. It's not mutually exclusive. They're both needed. You need the facts in order to develop those big ideas and apply those big ideas to other situations. Okay. So the ways that you guys can do this in your class, in any situation that you're teaching, you can talk about how that situation, that topic, is applicable in different scenarios, in different examples. Any way that you can apply it across different content areas is the best way to do it. Apply analogies. Use analogies whenever you're comparing one concept to another. In marine science, and I know this is some of y'all have no idea what this is, but this is how winds blow on the surface of the earth. How winds blow is that they are set up by a balance of forces, and the winds actually blow perpendicular to them around the low pressure system. That concept is the same concept that currents move. And so what I do in my marine science course is I teach them the atmospheric first, and then I say, remember atmospheric? Those forces are the same forces that act in water, the pressure gradient versus the Coriolis and all that good stuff. And then I say, now extrapolate, how will your currents move around a low pressure system in the ocean? And that allows them to extrapolate, use their prior knowledge, and apply it to a new situation. And so that's something that you guys can do in your own courses, whatever it might be, to get them to kind of apply that situation. So we've actually already talked about some of these examples, the think, pair, shares. Was there another example that some of y'all talked about? They kind of need prior knowledge in order to develop that understanding. Y'all had one and y'all had one. Was there another one that you guys talked about? What was y'all's that y'all talked about?
We were just talking about how students tend to assume that they're never going to use math in their life. And math and physics is really in everything. So the more you understand it, the more you understand the world around you, and how it's important for teachers to insert more real-world examples of how it's used in
Absolutely.
everyday life.
Yep. And that's a good example of, in math and physics, we use it all the time, we just don't realize that we use it. And that's a good way to show that you are actually using prior knowledge. It's just not the way that you're thinking of, the way that you expect to be thinking of in your actual lecture course. Okay. So some examples of this would be number 38. What's the principle? And sorry about the copying. I did it the way I hate it. Oh well, I couldn't get it changed. So in number 38, once the students recognize the problem, they assess what principle they use. So this could be in physics, this could be in any field where you have certain principles that you apply for students to kind of apply that understanding to everyday situations. One of my favorites that I've done before is Blender, which is on the next page, number 93. And this is where students brainstorm an idea to themselves, write down their ideas, and then they start coming together as 2s and 3s and 4s, where they then incorporate all those ideas into a single explanation or description of a concept. And it's really great for scientists. It's also great for any other type of department where you have multiple ideas that kind of form a cohesive explanatory whole. And that one's fun to do because it gets students to meet other people. So an application to major, that one's pretty obvious. How can you apply this concept you just learned to your own major? Is there some way that you can apply it? And it gets them to think about it that way. Okay. The third one is probably the one that is the most difficult to incorporate because it forces you to step outside of your teaching the content role. And I actually just did this with my own students in marine science a couple weeks ago about getting them to think about how they think. And that's what metacognition is that when you're trying to get students to understand, not just understand topics, but really incorporate it into their understanding and their learning, they need to realize how it is that they actually learn, how well they actually learn. It's an awareness of asking yourself, how does this relate to prior knowledge? How do I best incorporate it into my knowledge? Okay, it's thinking about thinking is what metacognition is. And so an example of this would be All right, I'm going to give you guys a string of numbers, and I want you to repeat it back to me, okay? 2163958 to 116920. But, so good. How did you remember those numbers?
There was kind of a rhythm to the way they
Mm-hmm.
and there was a repetition of the 2, 1.
Okay. So, and some of y'all may have been remembering the first string, and so you kept that first string running through your head over and over and over. That's thinking about how you think. Okay, that's a very simplified way of doing it. And another example would be students who were directed to engage in explanation of math problems as they did it, explain it to themselves, developed a better understanding of that math. So what you need to do in your classes, no matter what your role is to get students to start thinking about how best they actually learn. Is it because they outline? Is it because they have, they record the sessions and they listen to it over and over? That's something they need to learn about themselves if they're not actually taught how to do that in high school at all or in any of their college courses. I know I wasn't. This is not something I thought about until I got into graduate school, and I realized, man, why do I keep putting everything off? Why is it that I'm leaving things until the last minute? That's how I learn, but that's not the best way to learn. And so I need to start thinking about how best I actually learn. So let me give you another example. I'm going to give you guys this little passage. Don't open the passage yet that I'm giving you. And I'm going to have you guys, so don't open it yet, and I'm going to have you think about it and rephrase it, but don't look at it just yet. Yours. 2 and 3. All right, so go ahead and open it and read it. So I'm going to stop you. What did you do to try and understand this rather long, complicated sentence? What was the actual thing that you did as you were reading it? What did you make yourself do to try and actually comprehend what that sentence was saying? Do what? Okay, you stopped at the punctuation, then what did you do? Went back and read it. What else did y'all do? Did anyone else do anything different? Yep, exactly. So y'all all had different techniques for comprehending that passage. Most good readers will back up several times. They'll either read it all the way through it and then go back to sections, or read up to a punctuation mark, reread it, and make sure they understand each section. Poor readers will read all the way through without pausing and just say, I didn't understand it, and not go back and rethink it. And so this is metacognition. You're thinking about how you best understand, and this is what students need to start learning how to do. So in my class last couple weeks ago, I actually said, students, I want you to, as part of a bonus point quiz, I want you to tell me how you best learn and what things I need to start doing better in class to help you learn better. And that's a way to get them to start thinking about how they think, okay? So how y'all can incorporate metacognition in your class is number 11 in this handout. Self-assessment ways of learning. So that's what I just did, was I prepared a questionnaire as a bonus point for students to say what best ways they actually learn, and have them start thinking about it. They don't realize that's what you're doing, is getting them to think about thinking. It gets them to just start considering that as something they need to start considering. And then number 59, self-confidence surveys. Where are they best at? What are they not quite as good at? And that gets them to start thinking about, I am not really as good at the biology versus the physics. Maybe I should start concentrating more on the biology part of stuff, okay? So it gets them to start thinking about where they need to start improving. All of that is metacognition, and it should be incorporated into active learning, or as an active learning example. So a couple of other techniques I wanted to show you guys. So what's the attention span of you guys, of average adults? How long do you think the actual, and don't look at your notes, how long do you think it actually is? Yeah, actually less. But would I hear someone? Yeah. College students, undergrads, 5. But average adults is about 10 minutes. And so with that knowledge, whatever you talk about in class or whatever you do in your class, you should have breaks every 10 to 15 minutes because they're not going to be processing or listening to anything else past that first 10 minutes until they stop, their brain stops, and then it restarts, and they have missed, 10 minutes of what you just talked about. So these are things that you should do in class. It's not like you're cheating them out of learning. You're actually helping their learning by pausing, incorporating these active learning strategies that helps them learn better, okay? And so these are just a bunch of examples, really, really easy active learning strategies every one of you guys can do in each of your classes. It doesn't matter what the department is, what the program is. 1-minute papers is checking how well they understood what you just went over that day or previous week in class. Muddiest points, I do this a lot in my lectures. I say, okay, what did I talk about today that you guys really didn't know about? I give them time to flip through their notes, find what it is they weren't clear on, and then the next class period I actually address those questions. Turn to your neighbor discussions and think pair shares are very similar. Get them to talk to each other. What are some problems with, especially with undergraduates, what are some problems with these? Yes. And I actually asked my students in that quiz, I said, do you guys like the active learning technique of the think, pair, share? And what was interesting was I did the percentages, of course. 70% said yes, and no, 60% said yes, 40% said no, all we do is talk about something else, so don't do it. So I haven't decided what to do about that yet. But a lot of them realize that they're getting something out of it, and then there are the ones that don't. They just chatter, they are on their phone, whatever. So that's something you have to think about. It depends on how big your class is, whether you can moderate it or not better. My class is a 200-person class, so it's very difficult to moderate whether students are being chatty Cathys or not. So that's just something to keep in mind as you're going through these. Another really good one that I like doing because it's very active is called concept maps. And this is number 43. Has anyone ever done a concept map before? Really? Oh, they're awesome. So what this does is this is particularly for really big picture ideas. It helps students to really illustrate connections between all the facets. So this can be in any type of department. But say, for example, you have students in groups or in threes or whatever. You give them this concept and you say, list all the words that come to mind with respect to that concept. So because I'm science, the easiest one I could think of was a carbon cycle. So I tell my students, list all the components of a carbon cycle. And they'll come up with a whole bunch of stuff. Photosynthesis, sunlight, fossil fuels, CO2, blah, blah, blah. And that's where they're brainstorming themselves. And then they come together as groups and then start talking about it and how they all interact together. And they come up with the actual map of the carbon cycle itself. And this is knowledge they generate themselves. They actually incorporate their prior knowledge, generate it with the social aspect, and this becomes an active learning strategy that really helps to cement those concepts into their brain, okay? And you didn't have to do any teaching except for the basics or the fundamentals beforehand. Another type of active learning that you can do in any department is problem or inquiry-based learning, where basically you give them a problem, they have to actively search out the information to solve it. And this can be done in all sorts of different fields, just depending on what your actual field is. You can have a lot of different ways of learning be done with this type of inquiry-based learning. If any of y'all use case method teaching, that's what this is. It's just another way of saying case method teaching. So in the example of marine science, I asked students, why was the Atlantic hurricane season, the actual numbers so light? We're not talking about severity, but we're talking about why was it so light. And it makes them start thinking about all the facets that come to play. They have to start explaining it to each other and come to an actual solution to that question. And then another way to do that is learning cells. You guys may have done this before, where you actually have students answer a question in pairs or in cells, where one student provides an answer to the question. The second student will either support it, provide more evidence, or refute it and say, this is why, not this is the correct answer. And that helps them to really bounce ideas off of each other. Again, another really good example of learning strategies, of active learning strategies. And so this gets students to start thinking about really questioning the actual concepts and what their knowledge is, okay? So kind of to wrap up, when you're doing active learning, always remember that you need to tell students that you are expecting them to participate. You don't want them to just sit there like bumps on a log, okay? Sometimes it's hard, especially if y'all have the 8 o'clock. Does anybody have the 8 o'clock class in here? Yeah, those are hard. Whew, so hard. Use strategies that support the whole point of what you're trying to do. Don't use a think, pair, share if you're trying to get students to just know basic concepts. Select strategies that you're most comfortable in. Teach with your own personality in mind. If you're not comfortable doing interactive stuff, find one that's not so interactive. Okay, that's totally fine. And plan it out in advance, practice it in advance, use your friends as guinea pigs. Okay, promise them beers or pizza, whatever it takes. And remember that activities always take longer than you think, always, always, always. My presentation took 2 minutes longer than I expected to, always takes longer. And I've whittled it down numerous times. And then get feedbacks. Let the students tell you whether they liked it or not, and they will appreciate that, okay? So, just kind of as a final wrap-up, do y'all have any comments or questions of what has or has not worked for you? I would like to have a little bit of discussion. I know some of y'all may need to leave. It's 4:25 right now. There is a evaluation sheet that if you could please fill out and let me know how the session went. But if y'all have any concepts or, comments that you'd like to give about strategies that have worked for y'all, I would love to hear them. More examples, the better, that I can give in future presentations. Do y'all remember any active learning strategies that really worked for y'all? Think about in your own fields right now. What works for y'all? Yeah?
I found when I do group work, making them all specifically responsible for a certain element of it, make sure that they all work together and work as a group rather than, one or two good students doing all the work.
Yes. And that's a really good thing to do. It also takes a lot of management. And so it's easier for smaller classes. I wish I had that smaller type of class so I could do that. Because then that allows them to teach their knowledge to others. And that's beautiful active learning techniques. Absolutely. Any other comments about what has worked for you guys in your own classes that you're doing right now? Sciences, they always say sciences have it easy because we do such active techniques anyway. But you can do it. If it's rote, lab procedure, they can do it and go through all the steps and still not know what they're doing. They're still not incorporating it into their knowledge, unfortunately. So you still have to do these techniques, even if you're in lab sciences. Any other comments? Thank you, guys. I appreciate y'all coming. Thank you.